Dear technical recruiter, if you need a developer with at least 5-year experience in Angular, React, and Vue.js who is proficient in Java, Node, SQL, with some Python experience and who is AWS certified, you do not need a software developer. That is a whole IT department. In order to understand what we do and the tools we use to accomplish it, think about software developers as if we are plumbers. You have a source of water somewhere outside the city. You also have all the devices at home giving you access to that water, and then you have a whole piping mechanism making sure this water gets to such devices at home. Now, software engineering does the exact same thing, but instead of water, we have a database. And this is where all your company data, funny YouTube videos, cat pictures, secure passwords, and all your Facebook political commentaries lives in some company's database. The software developer who specializes in developing these databases are called data engineers. And the most popular computer languages used to build these databases are SQL or SQL, Oracle, PostgreSQL or PostgreSQL, MongoDB, etc. But we also have cloud databases such as Azure, Firebase, and AWS. The information stored in these databases is sent to your devices at home. But instead of your sink, shower, or lavatories, these devices are your cell phone, laptop, desktop, tablets, etc. And instead of water, we are sending data. And we do this through beautifully created APIs. More on APIs later. Now, if we were to receive data directly from a database, your screen will look something like this because that's how raw JSON data looks like. And that's why, other than the data engineer, we need another type of developer who ensures this data is received, who styles the data into human-friendly user interfaces so our computer screen don't look like that, and who writes code allowing us to update those remote databases from the comfort of our own devices. And these software engineers are what we call front-end developers. The technologies used in front-end development are only HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Sounds pretty simple, but no. It's not that simple because JavaScript itself has libraries. For example, these two pieces of code do the exact same thing. They both request information from a database, but one is written in plain old vanilla JavaScript, and the other is written with jQuery, which is a library of JavaScript code. Now, why this one looks so short? Well, because since jQuery is a library of JavaScript, as soon as I write $.getJSON, behind the scenes, jQuery invokes this plain vanilla JavaScript code, allowing us to do more by writing less, and sometimes even optimizing code in a way that you couldn't do with plain vanilla JavaScript. So yes, jQuery is a library of JavaScript, pretty simple, but so is React.js, Vue.js, all the versions of Angular, TypeScript, Polymers, Svelte, Ember, etc., etc., etc. Like, there are a lot of JavaScript frameworks out there. So if you reach out to a developer who writes code in any of these frameworks, he or she knows JavaScript. But being an expert on any of these frameworks does not mean you necessarily know how to code in all the other libraries, despite the fact all of them being JavaScript. And this is probably one of the most frustrating parts of talking with technical recruiters. Hey, I see that you are a React.js developer who also knows jQuery. Yes, I do. But I was wondering, do you know any JavaScript? Please don't be that guy. And then we have CSS, which you could say is the language we use to style your websites. But CSS also have its own libraries, such as Bootstrap, Sass, Less, Material UI, and Material Design, among many others. I recently heard about Tailwind is the next big thing in CSS. Now pay attention here, because learning the difference between languages and their frameworks or libraries is one of the most basic understandings that technical recruiters should have in order to effectively assess a candidate's suitability for any given position. So we already went over the technologies that data engineers and front-end developers use, but we have not discussed the back-end developer role and the language and frameworks that they use. Remember when I said that data is transferred from a database into your screen through beautifully created APIs? Well, this is where our plumbing analogy becomes handy again, because in software engineering, the process of sending and receiving data does not happen through pipes, but through rather something called hypertext transfer protocol, which is how we route your information into and from the right databases by developing universal resource locators so we can find where in the World Wide Web your database lives. The backend developer also makes sure data is not released to users who are not authenticated or authorized. So a lot of heavy lifting in the security department happens here. Now, the backend developer is not only creating secure API routes so data can travel back and forth. Sometimes we need to do powerful calculations with the information in that database before we can display that into the front end. Let's say, for example, I own an airport and I need to know how much jet fuel I need for 120 transatlantic flights at a very specific altitude along many other pieces of aeronautical data before displaying the results into the screen. For this kind of work, our software developer might use a backend language such as Python because of its embedded mathematical libraries. Or if a company wants to use something more mature and time-tested, they might go for Java, PHP, or C#. Or if they're interested in a much modern backend language, they could try Node.js, which is also JavaScript, or Ruby, among many, many others. Now, something to take into consideration is that just like in JavaScript and CSS, all these backend languages have their own libraries. And as a technical recruiter, understanding the difference between the two could be incredibly helpful. My client is looking for a Python developer. I'm not a Python developer, I am a JavaScript developer, but I appreciate you letting me know. That's okay, but do you know any Django by any chance? If I don't know Python, I won't know Django or Flask because one is a framework of the other. And as technical recruiters, you guys really need to know this. When you draft an IT position that requires all these different skills, you need to understand that more often than not, these are different people. And yes, we do have the full stack developer capable of going from front to back on a given project, but usually these people are jack of all trades and masters of one. So don't expect the full stack developer to deliver awesome UI exactly like the front-end developer would, or a flawless data architecture at the same level of a person that has been doing SQL for the last 15 years. Because by necessity, the full stack developer sacrifices depth for the sake of breadth, which is totally fine. Is that what your client needs? So before you reach out to your next candidate or post that new IT job on LinkedIn, please understand these 3 rows and what your client needs actually are. Hopefully, now you understand that by demanding candidates to know SQL, React.js, Java, Django, PHP with at least 5-year experience in AWS is not only absurd, but it can also discourage perfectly qualified candidates from applying. Now, before I put this video to an end, there is a 4th kind of people in the web development process that I would like to talk about. This is not the database developer, the backend developer, nor the UI developer. These people are known as user experience designers. The UX designer does not necessarily write code, but they are experts at designing websites that are engaging, visually appealing, and that make sense. If you've ever been in a website where the graphic looks sketchy, the color combinations are off, and you can't find the things you need, chances are that company didn't hire a good user experience designer. UX professionals know what color patterns make sense from both an aesthetic and psychological standpoint. They create logos and icons that are unique and develop wireframes that guide the direction of the whole web development process, all before we have to write a single line of code. Thank you for watching. This video is intended for non-technical technical recruiters, so I am very aware it's grossly oversimplified. If you are bothered by the oversimplifications, that means that you are not the intended target population for this video. On the other hand, if you found this video too technical for you and you are a technical recruiter, please leave your comments and questions below, and I or other members of the community will be happy to answer. Until next time.